right, so I would love to just start by asking you all a question. How many of you have tried to learn a new language before? Show of hands. All of you, wow. How many of you have succeeded? A lot of you. You know why? Because this is Sweden. Of course, it makes perfect sense. If I asked that question in most parts of the world, I bet nowhere near as many people would put their hands up. But of course, this is Sweden. Well, whether you've succeeded in learning a new language or you're still trying, you are not alone. Okay, there are approximately 1.2 billion people learning a new language around the world. Now, the vast majority of them are learning one language in particular, a language spoken by everyone in this room. That's right, at least 800 million people are learning English. And many of them are doing this to get out of poverty. The reason for this is simple. In most countries, you can earn between 25 and 100% more just by knowing English. So, 800 million people learning English, but what about the other 400 million people? Why are they learning a new language? Well, I ask these questions because I am part of a team that is trying to make language education free for everyone in the world. It's called Duolingo, and we now have more than 300 million people using this app to learn a new language 100% free. So that means that we actually have one of the largest data sets of language learners in existence. And we have studied millions of people spanning every single country on the planet. Our research team created this map, and it shows us the most popular languages to learn in each country around the world. And it tells us a lot of really interesting things. For example, we can see clearly just how popular it is to learn English. This is something we expected, of course. But then we noticed something that some of you have already noticed, albeit a lot slower. It's something unexpected, something strange. If I zoom in here, that'll make it a lot clearer. The data told us that the most popular language to learn here in Sweden is Swedish. Now, this sounded like a mistake to us in the United States. We thought, how could this be? Swedish can't be that hard to learn, can it? But of course, you probably know the reason. So why was this? Why was the most popular language to learn in Sweden Swedish? Refugees. Right, Sweden saw more than a 10x increase in the number of refugees seeking asylum here between the year of 2015 and 2016 alone. And as they arrived, many of them began looking for a way to learn Swedish for free on their smartphones. And of course, many of these refugees came from Syria. As a matter of fact, there are actually now more Syrian refugees in the world than the entire population of the city of Los Angeles in the United States. So there are more than 6 million registered Syrian refugees and counting. Now, big numbers like this can be shocking, but it's really not the first time that we've heard something like this. To give an example, the UN actually came out with a study not so long ago that showed that more people have access to cell phones than toilets. That says something about our priorities, doesn't it? And when I first heard about this, I wasn't sure whether to be impressed or ashamed. But then I was reminded that over the years, we have actually received thousands of letters and emails from people who are using technology, their phones, to get themselves out of difficult circumstances and change their lives for the better. Here's one of them. It said, "Learning German was a necessity for me to advance in my career and broaden my options beyond Syria. Living in a country torn by a hideous war and daily terrible news was unbearable, but learning a new language gave me hope." This person now resides in Germany. And we received many letters just like this one over the years, and When we discovered what was going on, when we saw what was famously called the migrant crisis, and we saw what was happening here in Sweden and in many other parts of the world, we decided that simply replying to these letters and publishing language research was simply not enough. So we decided to go further. Literally, about 6,000 miles further to be exact. And we traveled from the United States to the source of all of this, in Turkey and the Middle East, with the hopes of finding and meeting some of the people that had been writing to us all of these years. So our journey began here in Gaziantep, just over the border with Syria in Turkey. Show you some photos. Now, the first person to let us into their home and into their life was a person named Aleh. Now, he actually protested against the Syrian government when things started to turn bad in his country, but he was arrested during one of his protests and dragged off to jail. But as he explained to us, this was actually no ordinary jail. He said that he was placed in a small cell with 50 other men, so small and so crowded that they all had to sit balled up with their knees to their chests, unable to stand up and not allowed to speak for 1 entire year. And he said that he did not get to see the sky for 1 year. Now, thankfully, he was released, and after he was released, he fled to Turkey, which is where his story takes more of a positive turn, thankfully. Now, the first thing he did was teach himself how to speak Turkish using simply a smartphone and free resources. Fast forward just a couple of years, and he has now become a school teacher himself, teaching Arabic language from Turkish and computer programming to the kids in Turkey, helping to make their lives better. He's doing much better himself, as you can see. Next up is a remarkable lady named Noor. Originally from Iraq, she fled the country after a car bomb exploded on the street outside her house, shattering the windows to the house and sending bullets flying in all directions. It's the rebels fighting the army at the time. She told us a story of fleeing in her car with her entire family while their house turned into a literal war zone. Now, she also fled to Turkey, and she also taught herself how to speak Turkish using simply a smartphone and free resources. She now speaks more than 5 languages fluently and certified, and has become a successful software engineer. Her name actually has a meaning. It simply means the light, which I think is quite appropriate for her. Now, I have just one more story for you today, and it comes from the final stop on our journey. We were granted last-minute permission to enter this place. And this is Azraq refugee camp in Jordan, and it is one of the largest refugee camps on the planet. See, Azraq refugee camp has a population of 37,000 refugees. And out of 37,000 refugees, 60% of them are children. Now, as I'm sure you can imagine, this is a very difficult place to gain access to. And even once our team was inside the camp, they were very hesitant about just how much they wanted to show us. See, they didn't really understand why we had come there to see them. And after a little while, we found out why they were so worried about us being there. Well, it turns out that the camp was actually using Duolingo to teach thousands of refugees English. That's excellent. So why would they be worried about us being there, of all people? Well, it turns out that at first, they thought we may have come there to sue them for copyright infringement, because they were putting our logo on these certificates that they gave to the refugees. Yeah, they really thought we were lawyers in disguise for a while, and they relaxed a lot when we told them, no, it's fine, we're the people building the software, you can do this, it's great, keep doing it. And they introduced us to this young man. This is Mahmoud. Mahmoud is about 15 years old, and he has been at Azraq refugee camp since he was a small child. You see, when his family fled Syria, they had to move between more than 30 different towns before they arrived at this refugee camp. So they fled on 30 separate occasions before they were able to find somewhere safe. Similar to Noor, whole family in a car. Now, we were introduced to Mahmoud because he is completely obsessed with learning English and mastering computer programming. And we asked him what he would say if he could send a message to everyone in the world to tell us about himself and his life. It's not a daunting question for a 15-year-old, is it? But he said this. He said, I want them to know about me that I never gave up with the war circumstances that we are in. He said, I love to learn so that life would continue. Of course, he's learning English. That's how he thinks about his education. Now, we met countless people on this journey, and they all seem to have just one surprising thing in common. Well, they were not learning a new language to earn more money or to get a better job. Now, they were learning a new language to survive, to triumph over impossible circumstances. You see, for them, learning a new language represents a chance at a new life. Right? It's a chance for them to find home again. So this all left us with just one final question. Beyond the software we're making, beyond the day-to-day, what else can we do about this? How can we tell more people about this? We decided to turn the stories from this journey into a documentary for the whole world to see. The documentary is called Something Like Home, and it promotes the United Nations Refugee Council petition. And this is a petition that asks the governments of each country around the world to make sure that all of the refugees in that country get access to a free education. It's free as well, of course. And I made this documentary really for the same reason I stand here before you today, at a design conference talking about refugees. It's as a reminder of something that we so often forget, even in places like Sweden. And it is that every data point is a person, every person has a story, and every person's story really matters. The things we do are going to have an effect on their stories. And in today's highly connected world, whether we realize it or not, and for better or worse, the things we design are going to have an impact far beyond anything we could imagine. And while we won't always get to decide who gets impacted by the things we design, we do get to decide how they are impacted by the things we design and what we choose to design as a result. Because for all we know, their very future could quite literally be in all of our hands. Thank you.
Say no.